Ironic development. It's interesting to note that since the toppling of Tivoli Gardens strongman, Christopher DUDUS Coke, there has been legislative moves aimed at addressing the burial practices made famous in Jamaica by West Kingston. Just over a month after the incursion of Tivoli Gardens, on Friday, July 16, 2010. The Jamaica Observer printed an article with the interesting title, KSAC Bans Private Vaults Building on Maypen Cemetery. An excerpt from the article reads, the Kingston and St. Andrew Corporation, KSAC, has barred private contractors from building vaults at the Maypen Cemetery. The disclosure was made by Mayor Desmond Mackenzie during Tuesday's council meeting. He said that the decision was taken after officers observed a vault being constructed at the cemetery on Monday, without any steel. That may have been the official explanation, but according to those closest to the action, the problems referred to by the officials as a need to resolve, from all accounts and investigations, are not new. The practice of building private vaults is an age-old one and no one has ever said anything about their construction, so why now? The answer is however very simple: should we accept what seems to be an overwhelming opinion by many Jamaicans, which echoes the sentiment that moves of this nature are simply being made at this time, not because they, the authorities, have just become aware of the problems, but are actually being made because DUDUS is no longer around. It has also been reverberated that such a drastic step is a part of a carefully orchestrated political move, aimed at smashing the practice of the centered-like reverence, which has been cultivated round the most notorious of characters in that region. Corruption in high places. The history of Jamaica as a nation has proven that there has always been, and to some extent, still remains so to date, even though it's on a lesser degree than what was once normal, in let's say the 70s and 80s, but regardless, the problem persists, an unprecedented relationship with some elected officials and members of the underworld. A fact that hinges on the doorpost of where the real problem stands. Excuses vary from A to Z as to why this happens. The climate, the culture, etc., etc. But the fact that this is so, simply cannot be denied. The men this volume highlights came to prominence with the help and aid of their political affiliations, a reality that simply should not have been so in the first place, but one which has haunted Jamaica, even before its independence. The association between politics and the underworld in Jamaica is simply what it is, an undeniable fact, and men like Christopher DUDUS Coke and his father, Lester Lloyd Jim Brown Coke, are just two prime examples of what would happen if the Democrats or Republicans were in cahoots with, let's say, the likes of the Crips, Bloods, Latin Kings or even the Mafia. This is the equivalent of what the problem was, and to some extent, still is in Jamaica, when compared to the wider world, a problematic scenario. No separation between politicians and gangsters. Some are quick to state that there is no real difference to begin with, but that aside, let's face some facts here. The association between the two, on the level that is commonplace in Jamaica, should never be, and therein lays one of the main roots of the problem. Without politics, these men would have been nothing more than mere run-of-the-mill thugs, but with politics, they became super thugs. The likes of who grew out of the control of their creators before they even realized what was happening. Maybe Mr. Seaga, former Prime Minister and former Member of Parliament for Western Kingston, said it best on a local television show, Impact, aired on Television Jamaica, TVJ, May 2010, when he said in no uncertain terms that, when he was Member of Parliament for Western Kingston, he did not enrich them. In other words, he knew gangsters were there, but he kept them in check. A clear suggestion that his successor, the Honourable Bruce Golding, Jamaica's present Prime Minister, 2011, did just the opposite upon taking the reins of power, and in doing so, created the kind of monster that Christopher DUDUS Coke is said to have apparently become. But stop. Wasn't Jim Brown around under Mr. Seaga's reign? He sure was, but then again, maybe Mr. Seaga does have a point, because Jim Brown became rich, via illegal means, outside of Jamaica, when what is being alleged, and what the evidence points to, is that regardless what DUDUS was involved in prior to Jamaica Labour Party regaining power in '07, his wealth increased by leaps and bounds, due to legitimate earnings which came about due to government-issued contracts, which amounted to hundreds of millions of dollars, an undeniable reality. This is not a matter of speculation, but on the contrary, a matter of documented undisputed facts, which in recent months have become common knowledge, leaving one question and one question only. What is wrong with this picture? There are always going to be those who operate on the wrong side of the law of any land, always have been and always will be, and in the same breath, there will always be politicians, but the line between the two should not be so thin, or in some cases, literally invisible, as was obviously the case in Tivoli Gardens. This is the real problem here, not the after effects, but the root cause of such a reality, and simplistic as it may sound, the very opposite of such action is where solution lies. Individuals can say whatever they want, and justify the sad reality by any means necessary, but for any civil society to progress, there must be a separation of gangsterism and politics. There must be a separation between the law and the lawless, and this goes not only for Jamaica, but for any progressive thinking democracy. It makes no sense dancing around the issue, because this is the solution if Jamaica is to ever move forward or recover from an image that has tarnished the reputation of this island paradise, far and wide. The solution is however rather simple. The guilty must be held accountable, and those with skeletons in their closets must be exposed, and after that is done, the people must demand integrity and accountability from those elected to lead. If this is not done, then we all need to get ready for round 2, as what we have seen, if no real changes are implemented, is just a mere forerunner for what's to come under the same modus operandi, more of the same, carnage and mayhem, the likes of which will make all previous occurrences look and feel pale in comparison. In the aftermath, DUDUS is gone, and life goes on. That's just the way it is, but in his aftermath, though thousands of miles away from home, and under the jurisdiction of the United States of America, the saga he was responsible for producing continues, with repercussions so crucial, they can only be described as devastating. In one way or the other, almost all Jamaicans were affected and to some extent, still are. Many may not have been directly involved, but the psychological burden, economic strain and the visuals of the physical damage alone is enough, even without direct involvement. Sections of Jamaica, namely Kingston and St. Andrew, were placed under a state of emergency, an equivalent to martial law. Clarification on fact. A state of emergency is a governmental declaration that can also be used if deemed necessary, as a rationale for suspending rights and freedoms of citizens, even if guaranteed under the Constitution. Such a declaration is usually issued during a time of natural or man-made disaster, during periods of civil unrest, or following a declaration of war or situation of international or internal armed conflict. In some countries rights and freedoms may be suspended during a state of emergency. For instance, freedom of movement, but not non-derogable rights. The right to life. The right to be free from torture and other inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment. The right to be free from slavery or servitude, and the right to be free from retroactive application of penal laws. This is what happened, what everyone in Kingston and St. Andrew were directly faced with, and what the rest of the nation faced indirectly. The wounds to many will remain fresh, and still the images of this account will remain a literal tattoo on the minds of many, but as dramatic as all that is and may even sound, to those unaware of what really unfolded, what needs to be realized, is that the spiral effect of DUDUS's whirlwind-like impact is like a never-ending cycle, with what appears to be like cans of worms being opened, one after another, implications, damning, Since DUDUS's departure, one of the most interesting developments is the blatant, but still somewhat diplomatic attempt, of many public figures in their bid to distance themselves from the man the United States labeled one of the world's most dangerous drug lords. In an effort to bring some resolve to the issue, the Jamaican government sanctioned a DUDUS Manat Commission of Inquiry, one such platform used to facilitate this effort of resolve. Approved in October of 2010, the Commission of Inquiry was established to clarify the inner wranglings of the entire DUDUS extradition saga, including but not limited to the retaining of U.S. law firm, Manat Phelps and Phillips, to lobby on behalf of the Jamaica Labour Party and their accused strongman, Michael Christopher Koch. Exhibit X. The following excerpt is taken from the local Jamaica Observer, Tuesday, October 12, 2010. Gov approves DUDUS Manat Commission of Inquiry. The government has decided to establish a commission of inquiry into the handling of the extradition request for former West Kingston strongman Christopher DUDUS Koch and the subsequent engagement of United States law firm Manat Phelps and Phillips. Prime Minister Bruce Golding, making the announcement in Parliament this afternoon, said the composition of the commission and the terms of reference will be made public shortly. The opposition People's National Party and a number of interest groups and individuals have been calling for a commission of inquiry into both matters which have been fraught with controversy. Golding initially denied engaging Manat to lobby the United States government on Koch's behalf, but subsequently admitted that the Jamaica Labour Party, and not the government, had engaged the firm. End of excerpt. Note: a $40 million Jamaican budget was initially allocated by the government for the staging of the inquiry, but a figure that was set to rise with the commission seeking an extension. The commission began at the Jamaica Conference Center in downtown Kingston on December 6, 2010, when the preliminary sitting took place. Update. The inquiry was eventually extended until May 16, 2011, but again not without incident, as the new price tab allocated for said proceedings has since ballooned to almost $100 million Jamaican dollars, a major issue amongst the Jamaican populace. From the commencement of the inquiry, many Jamaicans were left with a taste of disgust in their mouths over the proceedings. The commission was viewed by the majority of the public as a waste of time and of taxpayer dollars, and with public officials blatantly dancing around questions and issues. Needless to say, the Jamaican public was not impressed. How could they be, when officials like their then Minister of National Security, Mr. Dwight Nelson, took the stand and uttered the words, "I can't recall," when asked questions of a critical and vital nature, and also questions which were directly related to his portfolio. He didn't just respond in that manner once either, he did so several times, and that left many Jamaicans asking, should he have been the Minister of National Security to begin with, since his answers made it obvious that he was suffering from some type of undiagnosed, convenient memory loss? Then there was the calm and articulate response of Senator Dorothy Lightbourne, Attorney General and Minister of Justice, who made it clear in no certain terms that she signed the extradition request for DUDUS with a heavy heart, because there were issues with both the evidence and the manner in which the request was made. Then there was Mr. Carl Samuda, then Minister of Industry, Investment, and Commerce, who stated in no certain terms that he knew who DUDUS was, and had met him on numerous occasions, but was also quick to make it clear that he did not know him in the capacity that he was accused of. And to cap it off, then there was the sitting Prime Minister of Jamaica, the Hon. Bruce Golding, who testified under oath, March 18, 2011, at the above-mentioned inquiry, that he also knew DUDUS, and in his own words, quote, he, DUDUS, was typical of what is called dons in various communities. End of quote. Developments and revelations like those have left more questions than answers, questions mainly pertaining to the integrity of the country's leadership. In a very literal sense, almost every Jamaican had heard of DUDUS and his alleged deeds and reputation. So should Jamaicans believe that ministers of government likewise were not aware of who this man was, or who he was said to be? And shouldn't the very suggestion that he was who he was or might be enough for association with an individual of that nature to be off limits for government officials? The DUDUS Manat Commission of Inquiry, aired daily on national television, for transparency purposes, became somewhat of a political soap opera, and according to many Jamaicans, served only one good purpose: the purpose of showcasing the type of leadership that is really in charge of the country. Like one man commented, "Dem can hide from man but ja not sleeping, for him courtroom run off a different order, so make dem gwan, time longer than rope." Translated, they can hide from man, but God is not sleeping. His courtroom runs off a different order, so let them continue. Time has a funny way of making all things right. But as usual, it didn't stop there, because as revealing and as dramatic as it was to watch public officials grapple to find words that wouldn't implicate them while on the stand, there was also the very real and heart-wrenching issue of mothers still in search of their sons, who were said to have been taken away from their homes by members of the security forces during the incursion, but have not been seen, heard from or accounted for since said incident. An excerpt from an article on the subject, Jamaica Observer, Tuesday, November 9, 2010, reads, "Every day since May 25 when soldiers and police took 16-year-old schoolboy Dale Anthony Davis from his home in Tivoli Gardens, his mother stood at the gate of her house hopefully, anxiously awaiting his return. The day after the security forces mounted a bloody assault on the community against Christopher DUDUS Coke's militia, who manned barricades to prevent his capture and extradition to the United States, to face drugs and 2 gun charges. Dale was seen being taken away by policemen and soldiers. There has been no sign of him and 2 other boys missing since the Tivoli Gardens incursion. Reports are that many law-abiding residents killed by the security forces were not at the barricades fighting, but apparently the security forces did a complete job and there were a lot of extrajudicial killings in the community. All told, more than 74 people were killed in Tivoli Gardens and elsewhere in West Kingston. The last time Dale's family saw him was on May 25 when the soldiers and police were taking him away. When his sick grandaunt, whom Dale helped to take care of, often cooking her meals, asked where they were taking him because him no do nothing, a policeman in the party replied that he was going to the detention center at the National Arena to be checked out. But residents told investigators that they heard shots in a neighboring house and shortly after saw a body wrapped in a sheet being taken out by police and soldiers. They seemed to have checked him down, said an angry resident. The investigators have not been able to establish the identity of the police and soldiers who carried out the body. Despite the best efforts by the investigators from the Bureau of Special Investigations to find Dale, interviewing and showing photographs of him to juveniles who were held at the National Arena, visiting several places where he could have been, there was no sign of him. His was not among the bodies videotaped and photographed by the BSI. There was no structure or organized attempt by the security forces to identify those killed during the operation. This aspect was clumsily handled by the security forces. A truck moved through the community and picked up the bodies one by one and carried them to the Kingston Public Hospital morgue where they were stacked high to the ceiling. The hope of Dale's mother finding her son alive has dimmed, but at least she would like to get hold of his body to give him a decent funeral. She told me that Dale was not a bad boy, he was not a robber or a murderer, and as young as he was he cared for his family. Note: one of the missing boys was eventually identified by DNA in February 2011. Grotesque incidents of such magnitude should never be a part of the circle of a developing nation, with hopes of first world status by 2030, but as great and admirable as that may all sound, and as fast-paced as Jamaica is moving, on the flip side of the coin, the fact that incidents of this nature are still a very relevant part of this growing nation's pains, is simply sad, with an even more devastating after-effect, especially for those left to bear the burden, for example, mother of Dale Anthony Davis, a reality that again leaves one question and one question only: what was it all for? Additional testimonies of atrocities. Helena Pin, an elderly resident of Tivoli Gardens, said she saw soldiers shoot two young men at the house across the street from her. Quote, "They take them out of that house. They take them out and kill them," she was heard telling a reporter from The Guardian of London. "There wasn't a shootout with anybody." Another witness, Timothy McIntosh, said soldiers fired at unarmed residents. Most of these people that died weren't involved in any fighting. If Jamaicans and the world are to believe published reports and public addresses, the police are now in charge. The big bad wolf is gone. But stop, because although one thing is being said via the most effective outlets, the day-to-day reality of Jamaica tells a totally different story. Bodies are still piling, and guns still blazing. So again, the question remains, what was all that for, if indeed the problem remains? Or is it that the problem is bigger than it was initially assumed to be? In short, DUDUS is in New York, awaiting his day in court. Sandy Coke, his sister, was told to stay away from Tivoli Gardens, placed on restricted activity by law enforcement. Liberty is in police custody, awaiting trial on a variety of charges, which include firearms charges and impersonation of military personnel. Tivoli Gardens, as most people once knew it, is no more. The presidential clique is dismantled, or at least gone underground. There isn't even Paso Paso anymore, a weekly street dance in the Garrison, which was said to be famous world over, and was so crime-free, that tourists were known to leave five-star hotels to be a part of the ghetto festivity, with no fear of being robbed or taken advantage of in any way. That was the order. Special note: this event, Paso Paso, held on Spanish Town Road, at one of the many entrances into Tivoli Gardens, was the only event that had 100% free reign, going until the ridiculous hours of at times 7 a.m. The regular cut-off time for outdoor parties or events is set at midnight during the week and 2 a.m. on weekends. In born or learned trait, one thing is sure: even in their quests to gallivant, there was disruption and lawlessness. Paso Paso disrupted morning traffic, became an obstacle to commuters heading to work and children heading to school, as well as vendors from the rural areas heading to the downtown market district. This was the reality on the ground: unbridled reign, do as we pleased, when and how we pleased. An issue that according to many was never once addressed by law enforcement until the extradition of DUDUS to the United States. According to many interviewed for this volume, a lot has changed, some for the better, and some for the worse. With DUDUS gone, so is the subsidy that many in Tivoli Gardens and Western Kingston at large had become accustomed to, and literally depended on for their survival. No longer is there a West Kingston Jamboree, aimed at giving the children the type of festive season that had now become commonplace in the community. Note: in December of 2010, members of law enforcement made the effort of staging a Christmas street for the children of West Kingston, an effort which paled in comparison to DUDUS's weakest effort. A move which many residents of West Kingston scoffed at, viewing the move as a blatant effort aimed at showing them that there was a new Don in town. The DUDUS era was over. No longer is there an island explosion or champions in action, which was said to have assisted many with the funds needed for back-to-school supplies at the start of every new school year. The avenue of job creation paved by DUDUS was now blocked with debris of uncertainty in the aftermath of his exit, which has left many without the opportunity to earn. The order that once existed in the downtown section of the city is seemingly gone. The inmates are running the asylum, and many feared that the days of trepidation are on their way back, the days when downtown Kingston was a place that many avoided at all cost. A lot has changed. DUDUS may be gone, but he didn't take crime with him. Crime is still a very dominant reality on the island of Jamaica, and from all observations, it is also clear that the influence he once had still remains what it has always been, forever in their hearts and minds. Exhibit Y. The following excerpt was printed in local Jamaican tabloid, The Star, on January 24, 2011. War for Tivoli Donship. Battle lines drawn over who should be next strongman. war is looming in sections of West Kingston as a group of young thugs are said to be working hard to ensure that nobody, unless appointed, rises as Don of the area. The Star has learnt that the young men are the sons of a number of high-ranking men from Tivoli Gardens, and they have reportedly made it known across West Kingston that only men related to them can be considered to take up leadership of the community. In a recent interview, Deputy Superintendent Arthur Brown, head of the Kingston West Division, said the police were urging anybody who has intentions of filling the shoes of Christopher DUDUS Coke to think twice. Since his extradition, a number of men expressed interest in becoming the West Kingston strongman. These intentions have, however, been met with resistance by both the police and thugs from the area. Last November, 2010, the police asked Andy Miller, also called Andy Fowl, to turn himself in after information that he was one such person interested in taking over West Kingston. 2 Fridays ago, Winston Black John Pennington was found with a single gunshot wound to the head in a section of Tivoli Gardens known as Top 10. While the police say they are yet to identify any suspects in the murder, checks with persons from the community found that fingers are being pointed at a man, said to be the son of a very influential resident of West Kingston. Yo, some young you to Rundy Place now, when me say Rundy Place, mean you mean as in Demody Don? But a dem make sure solely man when if a dem link can run West Kingston and nobody else dem say? The lickle man dem hot and dem no tech no talk, one thug said when the Star visited the community on the weekend. Pennington's murder is said to be a clear message to those like him, and those who support his dreams of donship. Right now the people kinda afret because the man dem wedded a support Black John a say a legit ding one because him was a good person and him did a look out for everybody, not just Tivoli people, but all people from Denham Town and Hannon Town. Another man explained. As a result, there is said to be tension among men from various sections of West Kingston as some persons side with the Sons, while others say they do not appreciate their views and actions. The Star spoke with one of the young thugs who chose his words carefully before saying, "Some man feels se cause dem and certain big man a friend, dem can jump up and talk about dem run place. And you so it go, orders if he send before anything like dat can gwan, and d two man dem who can give dem orders day. No day ya now, so until one of dem come back, we haul it off for dem." End of excerpt. A lot remains the same, even though a lot has changed. Another interesting development is that residents of Tivoli Gardens have even complained about being disrespected by their very own councillor, and, then, Mayor of Kingston and St Andrew, Desmond Mackenzie, who gave them jobs to push the heavily vegetated Maypen Cemetery, which runs along Spanish Town Road, adjacent to the Tivoli Gardens community. But when it was time to pay up, they were treated as if they were beggars, which resulted in one irate Tivoli resident and worker making her grouse known with the stinging, and I quote, "If our did DUDUS did give we work, we woulda did get we money long time without problem, and see dem send him gone to America under all kind of treatment and Desmond Mackenzie a come feisty with we, say him nah buy nobody vote." End of quote. In the aftermath, these are just some of the realities being faced by those left to pick up the pieces now that the DUDUS saga has subsided. A scenario in which it seems, has literally affected everyone in one way or the other, from politicians to the common man or woman in the streets, and sadly, this is a saga which may continue to produce fruits with a bitter aftertaste, for years to come. Pressy. All that has occurred because of, or due to DUDUS, is without doubt tragic, but as some would say, he made his bed hard, and now he has to lay in it. It's just that simple. No doubt he was a creation of a system way bigger than he ever was, or could ever dream to become, but even within all that, Michael Christopher DUDUS Coke was an individual who had the privilege of choice, and he chose what has eventually brought him to his Waterloo. What must not be overlooked in the overall final analysis of Michael Christopher DUDUS Coke, is that he was not average by a long shot, and neither were his opportunities. Unlike most children, who were born around the time he was, from the same or similar communities, DUDUS was provided for in ways they could only dream of, and in the context of this conversation, it makes no difference by which source those means came, ill-gotten or otherwise. The fact that he was privileged is what matters here. His high school transcripts tell a story of a young man with a bright future. He was intelligent, sharp and witty, and he used all he had in a way that didn't amount to much, after all that was said and done, because regardless what he has done, or owned, there is little doubt that he would rather be a free man in Jamaica, than being in the confines of a US jail cell, facing the possibility of a life sentence, especially with new evidence steadily mounting against him with each court appearance. No doubt the choice was his, and he could have easily utilized what he had in a way that would have kept him above reproach, but he didn't, and like it is said and universally accepted, for very action, there is a reaction, and DUDUS is presently awaiting the byproduct of his actions. Children live what they learn. There's no denying that simplistic and timeless fact, so maybe DUDUS did have an excuse after all, but stop, what about choice? That one-syllable verb that changes the entire dynamics of perception and reality. Like all of us, he always had that, but he chose or allowed the influence of his reality to become the dictator of his destiny. There was no rule that said he had to become what he eventually became, and it made no difference who his father was either. That was what it was, but it can also be viewed as an outright excuse if we fail to see DUDUS for what he himself truly became, regardless of his DNA or the family tree he fell from. Let's face the facts. If what our parents were dictated what we all became, all of us would be in totally different places, and doing totally different things. So regardless who his father was, in the bigger scheme of things, it really made no difference. It didn't even make a difference what he saw growing up or where he lived while growing up. Yes, all those contributions did have an impact on his future, but they were not excuses, and should never be treated as such. Michael Christopher Koch may not have been the typical Don, but he was who he was, a Don of the highest order, according to the very community he was from and the streets in general. Sure, there is always a twist to the story, and sure, some of what is said about DUDUS may not even be 100% true, and some of it may have even been edited for reasons of sensationalism, but regardless of what is true and what isn't, it is clear that if he wasn't who he was, in even the least possible of ways, then he would not have been implicated in the ways he had always been, and eventually fell victim to. So it stands to reason that there is indeed some truth to the stories that he was who he was, operating in the background without all the flash or bling, while forging loyalties, eliminating competitors and raking in millions. The issue of who DUDUS was and who he wasn't, isn't even a matter of opinion anymore. The evidence speaks for itself, so regardless of what is said or rebutted, it's clear, DUDUS was who he was, a Don, according to the very politicians he was aligned to, and, a Don, according to the understanding of Dons in Jamaica and criminality at large. Agree or disagree? To some, DUDUS wasn't a Don, but was merely the devoted father and community patriarch. A man who was respected in the majority of garrisons across Kingston, where he was a literal folk hero. Residents were known to revere him for providing handouts to the poorest of the poor. He was also credited for orchestrating neighborhood security, helping to maintain law and order by using his clout to punish crooks in an area where law enforcement had little presence. He was also known for providing jobs through his legitimate businesses, which included the construction company, Incomparable Enterprise, and so on and so forth the stories go. But on the flip side of all that, according to others, as kind-hearted as he was to those around him, that tenacity was the same at which he was known to address with deadly precision his rivals and those who violated. And according to the United States of America, he is also one of the world's most deadly drug dealers. Opinions differ in some ways and correspond in others, but regardless what one thinks or how this may or may not all play out, one thing is sure, DUDUS is in the custody of the US authorities, the same people, system who wanted, but never got his father. The prosecution against him is claiming to have star witnesses, and some are said to be prominent Jamaicans. DUDUS was connected. There was no doubt about that, but as it presently stands, time will tell how this will all play out, because regardless how connected he was, all that means nothing at this stage. This is no longer a Jamaican issue. The game has changed to international status. Michael Christopher Coke, aka DUDUS, may have been all that he was said to be, and may have perpetrated all he was accused of, but like so many infamous notables before him, his fate is no longer in his hands, and he's now faced with a system that is literally foreign to him. No witness will be intimidated there. The documents won't get lost in the shuffle. The evidence won't just one day mysteriously disappear, and it makes no difference if witnesses show up to court or not. The game has changed, and in the American justice system, circumstantial evidence is just as good as any other evidence. And there is plenty of that according to speculation. But above all that, what needs to be realized here even more than anything else, is the deadly end result of politics and corruption. DUDUSes are a dime a dozen, with quite possible hundreds been born since he was extradited. He was not the first and he won't be the last to face such a fate, and therein again remains the problem, because if Jamaica is to move forward as a nation, and this type of behavior confined to the pages of history, then the line between gangsterism and politics must become an electronic fence. Without this achieved, all we will see is a repeat of the same, just new and improved. So let your imagination run wild if you may. And just imagine for a second what type of DUDUS can, and will be produced in, let's say, 2020, 2025, 2035 and beyond. If indeed practices of this nature aren't eradicated from the reality of Jamaican politics. Just look at the not-so-distant past. Claudius Massop, Copper, Jim Brown, Jarty, Curly Locks, Borry Boy, Feathermop, and General Starkey, just to name a few of Jamaica's most notorious politically affiliated thugs, and we will undoubtedly get a vivid idea of how we are to gauge the future, if indeed there is no real and lasting change in the system of governance and political practices that have long been entrenched in the island of Jamaica. The solution of tomorrow rests on the decisions of today, point blank and period. All through history, there have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they seem invincible, but in the end they always fall. Always, Mahatma Gandhi. In conclusion, since the first printing of this book in 2011, Christopher DUDUS Coke has been sentenced to 23 years in a US prison, the maximum sentence he faced. Coke, then 43, pleaded guilty to drug and gun trafficking charges in August 2011. Since then, Coke has been transferred to the Fort Dix Federal Correctional Institution, FCI, located in the state of New Jersey, a low-security prison with no bars, towers, or locks, to complete his 23-year prison sentence. In 2019, former Prime Minister and long-standing Member of Parliament for West Kingston, Edward Seaga passed away, interestingly enough, on his 80th birthday. Murder charges have been laid against Andrew Layton Coke, otherwise called Livity or Live Up, and Michael Christopher Coke Jr., otherwise called Titty Man, brother and son, respectively, to DUDUS. Livity and Titty Man have been charged with murder and conspiracy to commit murder in respect to the death of 31-year-old Patrick Davis, otherwise called P-Boy, an alleged area leader from the neighboring Denhamtown community, whose body was found in Rockford, East Kingston on Monday, March 12, 2018. Update, on the 22nd of April 2021, all the above-named individuals, the accused, were set free, after the prosecution's case, which revolved around a single witness, dissolved when said witness could not be located. On August 21, 2011, DUDUS's mother, Pauline Patsy Hawley Burton, passed away at the Kingston Public Hospital, a day after she was admitted. She was 64. The Presidential Clerk's Office, once the centerpiece of DUDUS command inside Tivoli Gardens, has since been used, decommissioned and transformed into a community police post. Camille Sandy Koch, DUDUS's sister and once an influential force in and around West Kingston, is now said to have started a new chapter, said to be an evangelist, spreading the good word. Harry Dogg, an alleged ex-lieutenant to DUDUS, who had survived 2 previous attempts on his life, was gunned down, January 31, 2021, on Darling Street, in close proximity to where a previous attempt on his life was made. Since DUDUS's departure, there has not been any acknowledged claimant to the Tivoli Gardens, West Kingston throne, although it has been rumored that an ongoing silent war has been in effect ever since his departure, for leadership of the coveted throne. DUDUS's release date is currently set at the 25th of January 2030. He will be 61 years old.
Well, here we now pull up.